In the spring of 2018, I was working for a big consumer insights firm in Harbor City. It's one of those places with shiny glass offices and people who say things like circle back without joking. I'd been there 5 years, had a decent salary, and I honestly thought my life was pretty normal. Then I had this one, small, stupid moment that turned into something that didn't feel normal at all. So picture this, it's a Wednesday. I'm up at 6:10 a.m., same as always. Shower, coffee, keys, phone, out the door. My apartment building had a little underground garage with maybe a dozen cars. Mine was parked in the same spot it always was. As I'm walking toward it, I notice a guy leaning against the wall right by my hood. Not sitting in a car, not on his phone, just there, like part of the concrete. He looked maybe mid to late 20s, hoodie pulled up, baseball cap under it, hands in the hoodie pocket like he was keeping something warm. He wasn't doing anything illegal, exactly, but the way he watched me made my skin tighten. You know when someone stares and it doesn't feel like curiosity, it feels like they're counting you. I stopped a few steps away and said, as evenly as I could, "Hey, you need something?" He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just tipped his head a tiny bit, like he was listening to a song I couldn't hear. Then he said, really flat, "Nobody can help you, pal." Not "I'm good," not "wrong car," just that. It was such a weird line that I almost laughed. Almost, but he was still leaning on my car like he owned it. So I didn't. I nodded like, okay, whatever. I unlocked the door, slid in, and started backing out. I kept my eyes on him in the mirror. He didn't move, he just stared. And right before I turned the corner and lost sight of him, I saw his mouth pull into this wide grin that didn't match his eyes at all. The rest of the morning felt off. I got cut off twice within 10 minutes. A cyclist slapped the side of my car at a red light, like I'd wronged him personally. Some guy in a delivery van screamed something at me I couldn't even make out. By the time I got to work and sat through a long midweek meeting led by my manager, Tessa, I'd mostly shoved the parking garage guy into the weird but harmless part of my brain. That lasted until I got home. I pulled into the garage and my spot looked fine. No broken glass, no smashed mirrors. I actually felt relieved. Then I took the elevator up, walked down the hall, and before I even turned the last corner, I smelled it. It hit me like warm garbage and sour milk and something metallic underneath. I rounded the corner and stopped so fast my shoes squeaked. Someone had smeared diarrhea all over my apartment door. Not a little streak, not a prank-sized smear. I mean, the whole center of the door looked like it had been sprayed and slapped and rubbed in, like somebody had taken their time making sure it reached the peephole, the handle, the little welcome mat. The pattern was messy and violent, like the door had been the target of pure, ugly effort. I stood there with my keys in my hand, staring like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were telling it. And then the smell crawled up my nose and I gagged, loud, like a cartoon. I clamped my sleeve over my mouth and backed away because I was genuinely scared I was going to throw up right there in the hallway. I went back down to the lobby, trying not to breathe, and called an emergency cleaning company. Then I called the building's front desk and asked for security footage. We had cameras in the corridors and by the elevators. One of the reasons I'd picked the place. The cleaners showed up fast. I tipped them too much, because watching someone clean that up without fainting felt like a superpower. By the time I got inside, it was late. I made coffee even though I didn't want it. I just needed something hot and normal in my hands. Then I opened my laptop and clicked the link the building sent me. I scrubbed through footage for a while, people coming and going, neighbors dragging laundry baskets. somebody's dog stopping to sniff a corner like it knew a secret. And then, early afternoon, I saw him. A hooded figure came through the main entrance wearing a bright reflective safety vest, like a package runner. He carried a medium-sized box tucked under one arm, head down, moving like he belonged. At first I thought, okay, delivery guy. He'll drop it and leave. He didn't. He walked straight to my door. No hesitation, no checking unit numbers. Like he'd lived there his whole life. He set the box down neatly. Then he turned his back to the camera, bent slightly, and pulled his pants down. I remember whispering, out loud, in my empty apartment, "No, no, no, no." And then he did it. Right there, calm as you like. He didn't rush. When he was done, he pulled his pants up and walked away like he'd just delivered groceries. He didn't even look around. What made it worse was this. I was almost sure it wasn't the same guy from the garage. This one looked taller, broader, different posture, different walk. But the hoodie and cap combo was the same, like it was a uniform. I called the police. The officer who came sounded bored before he even arrived. He looked at the footage and shrugged. He actually said, "Could be someone you know, messing with you." I told him, nobody I know would do that. He half smiled like he didn't believe me and said they'd keep an eye on it. The next morning, I woke up around 6:10 again. I didn't even want to go to work, but I figured staying on routine was smart. I went down to the garage. My car looked like it had been attacked by someone with a grudge and a toolbox. Both mirrors snapped, windshield spiderwebbed, tires slashed so badly the rims sat on the concrete. The hood had dents like someone had jumped on it, and across the driver's side door, scratched deep into the paint, was a word, LIAR, not in neat letters, in jagged, angry gashes. My stomach dropped in this slow, heavy way, like my body was trying to sink into the floor to hide. I called my manager, Tessa, and told her I couldn't come in. She didn't argue. She told me to take whatever time I needed, and for the first time I heard real worry in her voice. I called the police again. Different person this time, same vibe. They took another report, said they'd review footage, said it was hard when faces were covered. By that evening, I couldn't stop thinking the same thought. They know where I live. So I booked a room at a plain 3-star hotel nearby. Nothing fancy, just clean sheets and a lock that clicked loud. I called my older brother Cal, because I needed to hear someone I trusted say, "This is not normal." Cal listened. Then he got quiet and said, "You can't stay there." I agreed, but I also didn't know what not staying there even meant. My life was in that apartment. 2 days later, I went back in the afternoon to grab clothes and some stuff that felt comforting. A hoodie, a book, my stupid expensive pillow I was picky about. I took a rideshare so nobody could track my car. When I got to my floor, my door was half off the hinges. One of my neighbors, a guy named Rafi, was standing in the corridor staring at it, like he couldn't decide if he should run or pray. He looked at me and said, "I called the front desk." I didn't touch anything. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. My apartment wasn't just robbed, it was ruined. Like someone had walked through each room thinking, what will hurt the most? My shower glass was shattered. My bed frame snapped like kindling. Plates and mugs were smashed across the kitchen floor so the tiles glittered with sharp pieces. Drawers were pulled out and dumped. Framed photos torn. My laptop crushed. TV screen punched until it looked like a black spiderweb. And then I saw the fish tank. It was on its side, cracked open, water dried into a grimy stain. The little plastic castle I'd bought because it made me laugh was broken. My fish were gone, not stolen, not moved, gone. But there were faint dark smears on the floor, like something had been dragged. and I swear, for a second, I thought I saw a wet shape under the couch. When I bent down to look, it was just a sock. Still, I couldn't shake that moment. That thought that something living had suffered here while nobody could hear it. I left. I didn't even pack. I just walked out shaking and went back to the hotel. That night, I stared at the ceiling and tried to explain it to myself in logical pieces. Random vandalism, wrong place, someone unstable. But none of it fit the way they kept targeting me. A few days later, while I was trying to set up temporary housing and dealing with insurance calls, I started taking public transit to go meet landlords and sign paperwork. I'd walk from Lakeside Station to wherever I needed to be. It felt safer than being near my building. Then one evening, as I turned onto Cedar Lane, someone called my name. They said it like they were happy to see me. Like, "Hey, there you are." That's the only reason I turned. If it had sounded angry, I would have kept walking. A stranger jogged up, smiling like we were old friends, and then he punched me square in the face. Not a shove, not a slap, a full punch that made my ears ring and my eyes water instantly. I fell back, dropped my takeout, and hit the sidewalk hard. The stranger ran off, yelling my name again, adding, "You're disgusting. You hear me? You're disgusting." A couple of people helped me up. Most just stared and kept moving, because that's what people do when something ugly happens and they're afraid it might touch them. I went back to the hotel with a swollen cheek and a terrible realization. They didn't just know where I lived. They knew who I was. They could find me out in the open. That's when the phone call came. It was a private number. I answered without thinking, because I'd gotten used to unknown calls from landlords and insurance people. A man's voice came through, smooth and confident. He said my name. He said my employer. He mentioned my old address like he was reading it off a form. Then he said, "Don't hang up. I'm trying to help you." He called himself Rowan. He made it clear that wasn't his real name. Rowan told me he'd found my personal info posted online, along with photos, my work history, and a claim that I was a convicted child abuser who'd moved to start fresh. He said the post included enough detail that anyone could use it to find me. I was ready to tell him to get lost until he sent screenshots, and there it was. My face, my apartment building, my job title, even a couple of old photos I didn't remember sharing anywhere public. The worst part wasn't just the info, it was the tone of the post. It sounded like a warning, like a call to action, like whoever wrote it wanted strangers to punish me. Suddenly the garage guy made sense. The door, the car, the break-in, the punch. Rowan said he'd done some digging and believed he knew who wrote it. A former employee from my company who'd been let go after a performance review. Someone who blamed me. He didn't tell me the person's real name right away. He talked around it like he enjoyed the suspense. When I pushed him, he finally said the name. I knew it. Milo Hart. He'd been on my team briefly. Messy, late, always talking big, always delivering nothing. I'd documented everything the way you're supposed to. HR handled the rest. I hadn't even felt anything about it at the time. It was just work. But now my throat went dry, because I could suddenly picture Milo sitting somewhere, typing with calm hands, feeding my identity into a crowd like raw meat. Rowan said he could get the post removed. Then he paused and said he'd need money. Not for himself, he claimed. For friends who could help. He wanted a few thousand in cryptocurrency. I felt sick, because I didn't trust him, and I also didn't feel like I had a choice. Rowan offered to take the post down first, as proof. Hours later, the link stopped working. The screenshots vanished from the page like they'd never existed. Then the waiting started. 10 days went by with no new attacks, No more calls. No more strangers yelling my name. I started breathing again, just a little. On the 10th day, I paid. Rowan called once more, thanked me, and said, "You should be fine now." When I tried to call back, the number was disconnected. And here's the part I don't love telling people, because it makes me sound paranoid. But after everything that happened, paranoia didn't feel like a personality flaw. It felt like an organ, like a new sense my body grew. I still needed proof, something solid, so I pulled a favor through an old co-worker and got a number for Milo Hart. I called him and forced myself to sound cheerful, like I was doing him a kindness. I said I'd heard he was looking for work. I said I might know of openings. I apologized for how things went down, even though I wasn't sorry. Milo sounded surprised, not scared, not guilty, just cautious, like he was watching where the conversation wanted to go. Right at the end, when we were doing that awkward goodbye thing, I said, softly, "I know what you did." There was silence, not confused silence, not "what are you talking about?" silence. It was the kind of silence you get when someone's holding their breath so you don't hear them move. Then Milo hung up. No words, no denial, nothing. That should have been the end of it, right? Mystery solved. Bad guy identified. Lesson learned. New apartment, new job, new life. I wish. I did move. I left Harbor City. I changed industries. I stopped posting online. I scrubbed my profiles. I used fake names for food delivery. I kept my curtains closed. I told myself I was being smart, and for a while, it worked. Then, one night, about a year later, I was living in a different place entirely, in a quieter town where people actually say hello to strangers. I came home to find a small box on my doorstep. No return address, no label, just brown cardboard taped shut. My stomach tightened the same way it had in that garage. I stood there, key in the lock, staring at the box like it might blink. I brought it inside with 2 fingers, like it was dirty. I set it on my kitchen table. I didn't open it right away. I just listened. The apartment was silent, except for the fridge hum and the soft tick of my wall clock. Finally, I grabbed scissors and cut the tape. Inside was a reflective safety vest, the same kind delivery people wear, folded neatly, and on top of it was a baseball cap. Under the cap, tucked into the fold of the vest, was a printed sheet of paper, 1 page, black ink, no logo. It was a screenshot of a post, not the old one, a new one. My name was different on it, a name I'd never used anywhere public. My new address was right. My new job was right. There was a recent photo of me that I couldn't remember taking, standing near a cafe I'd visited once. At the bottom, someone had typed a single line, "Nobody can help you, pal." I sat down hard, like my legs forgot how to work. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. I tried to tell myself it had to be Milo, or someone connected to him, or even Rowan, running some long, ugly game. But then I noticed something small that made my skin go cold. The screenshot showed the post had been uploaded by a user called Rowan, all caps, like a signature. I stared at that name for a long time, trying to think of any normal explanation. Some copycat, some coincidence, some joke. Then my phone buzzed. Private number. I didn't answer. I just watched it vibrate on the table, inching slightly toward the edge with each pulse, like it wanted to fall. The buzzing stopped. A second later, my front door handle moved. Not a hard rattle, just a careful turn, like someone on the other side had a key and was testing whether I'd chained it. I don't remember standing up, but I did. I didn't shout. I didn't call out. I didn't even breathe right. I walked to the door as quietly as I could, and looked through the peephole. The hallway light was on, and the corridor was empty. No one there, no footsteps, no elevator ding, no sound of anyone walking away. Just my door, my breath, and the faint smell of something sour that hadn't been in my apartment a minute earlier. I backed away from the peephole and looked down at the box on the table. The vest was still there, folded like it was waiting for someone to put it on. And for the first time, I had this horrible, slippery thought that I still can't shake. What if Rowan didn't find my information? What if Rowan was just a part of all this that knew how to speak politely on the phone? What if the person doing these things wasn't trying to scare me off the internet, but trying to make sure I never stopped looking over my shoulder? Because if you spend long enough being hunted, you start acting like you deserve it. You start trimming yourself down. You start disappearing. And sometimes, late at night, I catch myself wondering something even worse. Not who's doing this, but how many people have seen it. Because if the post is out there again, under my new name, with my new face, it means someone is still telling that story about me. And somewhere, maybe right now, someone is reading it, deciding what I deserve, listening for the sound of my door. It happened in the fall of 2011, back when I was renting a small basement apartment on the edge of a town called Briar Hollow. It wasn't a bad place, just quiet in a way that made you notice your own footsteps. That morning was colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that makes your coffee taste sharper and your breath hang in the air longer than usual. I was walking home from the corner store, one hand wrapped around a paper cup, when I noticed a yard sale I hadn't seen before. It was set up in front of a sagging blue house with peeling paint and a porch that leaned slightly to the left, like it was tired of standing straight. The sale itself was small. A card table, 2 folding chairs, and a few blankets spread over dead grass. Nothing special. Still, I slowed down. I don't know why I stopped. I didn't need anything, but something about the way the items were laid out felt careful, almost deliberate, like someone was trying to keep things in a certain order, even though they no longer mattered. Behind the table sat a man named Harold Pike. I knew him, sort of. He used to be my landlord before his health went downhill and his daughter moved him into that house. We weren't close, but he'd always been polite, quiet, the kind of guy who nodded more than he talked. That morning, he looked thinner than I remembered. His coat hung loose on his shoulders, and his hands shook a little as he rested them on his knees. Still, when he saw me, he smiled like he was genuinely glad someone had stopped. "Morning," he said. His voice sounded dry, like he hadn't used it much lately. I said hello and asked how he was doing. He shrugged and said, "Can't complain much. Nobody listens anyway." I told him I was just looking around. He nodded and leaned back, watching me without moving. On the table were old paperback novels, a few porcelain animals, a chipped lamp with a yellowed shade, and a cardboard box filled with silverware so tarnished it looked almost black. Everything smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. That's when I noticed the book. It was thicker than the others, with a dark green cover that had faded unevenly, like it had spent years in the sun. No title on the front, just a faint impression where letters might have been once. When I picked it up, it felt warmer than it should have, considering the air. The pages were stiff, and some of them stuck together at the corners. Harold cleared his throat. "That one's strange," he said. I asked what he meant. He told me it was a collection of stories, personal ones, some written down, some copied from other places. He said a few of them were true, or close enough that it didn't matter. Then he laughed softly and added that he never finished reading it. Said it made his dreams feel crowded. I joked that maybe he should have charged extra for it, and that's when the sound of an engine rolled up the street. A rusted red SUV pulled up too fast and stopped crooked at the curb. 4 teenagers climbed out, loud, restless, the kind of kids who looked like they were already bored before they'd even decided what to do next. One of them kicked a plastic flower pot near the sidewalk, sending dry soil spilling out like ash. Harold straightened a little. His smile faded. He asked them if they were interested in buying anything. His voice stayed calm, but I could hear something tight underneath it. The tallest kid laughed and wandered off, knocking into things on purpose. Another one picked up a porcelain bird and rolled it between his hands, like he was testing its weight. "How much?" the kid asked. Harold told him a price. "Low. almost apologetic. The kid dropped it, not by accident. He dropped it and ground his heel into the pieces. The sound was sharp and ugly. Harold told him to stop, said those things mattered, said some of them belonged to his sister, who'd passed a few years earlier. He asked them to leave. The kid stepped closer and shoved him. Not hard enough to knock him over, but hard enough to send the message. I remember thinking someone should say something, that I should say something. Instead, I stood there holding the book, my fingers tight around the spine. Harold reached for his phone, said he was calling for help. The phone didn't make it out of his hand. One of the kids snatched it and tossed it into the street, where it landed face down and slid into a puddle. Then it got worse. They hit him, not all at once, one at a time, like they were taking turns. Harold fell, tried to cover his face. Someone laughed. Someone else kicked the table over. I remember the sound of silverware scattering across the pavement, ringing like tiny bells. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I watched. When sirens finally sounded, distant and thin, the kids scattered. The SUV peeled away, leaving the street suddenly quiet. Too quiet. Harold lay curled on his side, making a sound I didn't recognize at first. It took me a moment to realize it was crying. People came out of their houses then. Always after. The police arrived. Questions were asked. Statements taken. I barely remember what I said. Before the ambulance took him away, I handed Harold the book. He looked at it, then at me, and shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "I don't want it back in the house." That night, I couldn't sleep. The book sat on my kitchen table, untouched. I told myself I wouldn't read it. I told myself I'd throw it away in the morning. Instead, sometime after midnight, I opened it. The stories weren't scary in an obvious way. No monsters, no ghosts, just people, ordinary people, writing about moments they couldn't explain, about things that followed them home, about watching and being watched. One story ended mid-sentence, the ink growing heavier, like the writer had pressed down harder and harder before stopping. I fell asleep at the table. I dreamed about the yard sale, but it was wrong. The house was closer, the sky darker. The items on the table were different, familiar, but not. Things I recognized from my own apartment. My lamp, my dishes, my clothes. Harold stood behind the table, smiling wider than I'd ever seen him smile. He didn't move. He just watched. Behind me, I heard footsteps. When I woke up, the book was open to a page I didn't remember reading. At the top, written in uneven handwriting, was my name. Outside, somewhere down the street, I heard the scrape of a folding table being dragged across concrete. I used to think yard sales were harmless, just folding tables, old junk, awkward small talk, that sort of thing. Nothing dangerous about it. That belief didn't survive the spring of 2016. That was the year I lived on Alder Finch Road, in a quiet little town called Bristle Creek. One of those places where people wave even if they don't know your name and nothing ever seems to happen. I was 28 at the time and renting a small house by myself. The garage was a disaster. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, furniture I didn't use, clothes from some earlier version of me that I clearly wasn't going back to. So I figured, why not sell it all? I picked a Saturday morning in early April. Cool air, grey sky, the kind of day where sound carries a little farther than usual. I dragged everything out onto the driveway. Lamps, books, tools, kitchen junk. By 9:30, it actually looked like a real sale. People came by in waves. A couple with a stroller. An older man looking for records. A kid who bought a stack of video games and didn't even try to haggle. It was friendly, easy. I remember thinking how nice it felt to talk to people without really talking about anything important. Then, somewhere between my second cup of coffee and the sun finally pushing through the clouds, I noticed him. He didn't arrive the way other people did. I didn't see him walk up or park a car. He was just suddenly there, standing near the table where I'd laid out my tools. Not browsing exactly, just touching things, picking them up, setting them down. He wore a dull green jacket that looked too heavy for the weather, dark jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. His face was unremarkable in a way that made it hard to remember later. Average height, average build, the kind of person you'd forget as soon as you turned away, except his eyes. They didn't settle on anything. They kept moving, not fast, not nervous, just drifting, like they didn't need to focus to see. I walked over, trying to sound casual, asked if he needed help. He said he was just looking, but the words came out slow, flat. like he was repeating something he'd practiced a long time ago. I pointed out a box of extra tools near the garage. He nodded and wandered that way, dragging his fingers along the edge of the table as he went. By late morning, the crowd thinned out. The sun was higher. My feet hurt. I started packing small things back into boxes between customers. That's when I realized he was still there. An hour had passed, maybe more. He hadn't bought anything. He paced near the end of the driveway, stopping whenever I looked his way, pretending to examine things he'd already touched half a dozen times. Except now, he wasn't looking at the items at all. He was watching me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was tired, that some people are just awkward. Still, when I announced I'd be wrapping up soon, my voice shook a little. The last shoppers drifted off. A woman thanked me for a lamp. A teenage boy jogged away with a cardboard box under his arm. And then it was just the two of us. I started carrying boxes into the garage. When I came back out, he'd moved closer, right into the center of the driveway. He picked up a hammer, turning it over slowly, like he was feeling its weight for the first time. I told him the sale was over. He didn't argue, didn't apologize. He just stood there, holding the hammer, staring at the concrete. Something inside me went cold. I told him again, louder this time, to put it down, to leave. He looked up. I wish I could tell you what changed in his face. I can't. There was no snarl, no smile, just a quiet, heavy look, like a decision settling into place. He stepped toward me. I backed up without thinking. My heel caught on the edge of the driveway, and I stumbled. He moved faster than I expected. The hammer came up. I turned and ran for the garage, heart slamming so hard it hurt. He grabbed my arm, hard. I twisted, slipped, went down. The world tilted. Concrete scraped my palms. I crawled backward, hands searching blindly through a box that had tipped over. My fingers closed around cold metal. A wrench. I swung. I didn't aim. I didn't think. I just hit something solid, and he cried out. Not loud, more surprised than hurt. He staggered back, dropped the hammer, and for half a second, we just stared at each other. Then, I ran. I slammed the side door shut, locked it, and pressed my whole body against it, listening. For footsteps, for breathing, for anything. Nothing came. After a long time, I looked out the window. The driveway was empty. The police came, took statements, asked questions I couldn't answer. They never found him. No one else reported anything like it. Life moved on, the way it always does. But I changed. I stopped opening my garage unless I had to. I stopped trusting quiet moments. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear slow footsteps on gravel. When I check, there's nothing there. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 years later, after I moved to a different part of town, my neighbor Mara told me about her cousin. Her name was Eliza Rowe. She lived 3 streets over in a small blue house with a white fence. Eliza was 31, friendly, the kind of person who baked too much and gave it away. Mara wasn't related by blood. They'd grown up together, more like sisters than cousins. On a cold morning in March of 2018, Eliza set up a small sale in her driveway. Just a few things. Nothing big. She wanted extra money for a weekend trip. Nothing fancy. Mara was making tea when she heard the sounds. Sharp, loud, for quick cracks that didn't belong in a quiet neighborhood. By the time anyone got outside, it was over. A security camera down the block caught part of it. A person stepping out of a dark pickup, walking up, leaving seconds later. The footage was grainy, the face unreadable. The case went nowhere. Sometimes, when Mara talks about Eliza, she mentions a strange detail, something the police didn't think mattered. A neighbor remembered seeing a man earlier that morning, standing near the driveway before the sale started, looking at nothing in particular, wearing a heavy jacket. When she told me that, my stomach dropped. I didn't say anything. I still haven't. What would I even say? Every now and then, when I'm half asleep, I dream I'm standing in my old driveway again. The tables are set up. The sky is gray, and at the far edge, someone is waiting, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly, like he's listening for something only he can hear. In the dream, I don't run. I just stand there, trying to remember if I locked the door. And right before I wake up, I realize something that makes my chest tighten every single time. In the dream, he isn't holding a hammer. He's empty-handed, like he doesn't need one anymore. It happened on a slow Sunday morning in the spring of 2007, back when I still lived in the edge-of-town neighborhood near Briar Hollow Road. Nothing dramatic about that day. I remember wearing old sneakers, my hair still damp from a rushed shower, mentally listing the errands I needed to knock out before noon. Groceries, the dry cleaners, maybe a stop at the hardware store. Just normal stuff. I wasn't planning to stop anywhere else. That's the part that still bothers me. I was driving past Maple Row, half paying attention, when I noticed a crooked cardboard sign taped to a mailbox. The letters were uneven, written in thick black marker, "Yard sale." One corner had folded in on itself from the rain. I drove past it at first, then I slowed down, then I turned around. I told myself I was just killing time. The house was small and sagging in the middle, like it had given up trying to stand straight. Paint peeled off the siding in long curls. A couple of folding tables sat in the front yard, covered with old mugs, bent tools, yellowed paperbacks. Nothing special. No music. No other shoppers. I almost left. Then I saw the box. It was on the ground, not even on a table, pushed near the back leg, like someone wanted it out of sight. A plain cardboard box with no writing on it at all. The top was sealed with old tape that had gone brown and brittle. Dust coated it so thick I could see finger trails where someone had touched it before me. I crouched down and lifted it. It surprised me. It wasn't heavy, but it felt packed tight, like everything inside was pressed together on purpose. A man stood behind the nearest table. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe older. His hair was thinning and grey at the temples. He didn't smile. I asked him what was in the box. He shrugged, like the question bored him. Said it was just old things and I could look if I wanted. The tape came off with a soft tearing sound that felt way too loud in the quiet yard. When I lifted the lid, a smell drifted out. Not rotten, just old, like closed-up closets and forgotten rooms. Inside were small, ordinary things. A cracked plastic comb, a few tangled hair ties, 2 keys on a ring, rusted green at the edges, a faded scarf, some loose photographs, and then the newspapers. They were folded neatly, stacked one on top of the other, all yellow, all fragile. I opened the first one and saw the headline, "Local woman still unidentified after death." My stomach tightened. I flipped through more of them. Same story, same woman, different dates. The articles said she was found outside Ridgewood, near the old quarry, sometime in 1983. No name, no family, stepping forward. Just Jane Roe, a placeholder for someone nobody claimed. They described her as having dark hair, a thin build, and a faint scar near her left eyebrow. Then I noticed the photos tucked between the clippings. They weren't newspaper photos, they were personal, blurry black and white shots of a woman walking through parking lots, sitting alone on a bus bench, standing outside a grocery store, mid-step like she didn't know the photo was being taken. She looked tired in every picture, her shoulders slumped, her eyes always aimed slightly downward. The scar was there. I felt cold, even though the sun was out. The man behind the table hadn't moved. He wasn't watching me, exactly, just staring past me, like his focus was on something far behind my head. I asked him where the box came from. He said he found it in the attic after his uncle passed away. Claimed he never opened it. Said he didn't care what happened to it. That answer stuck with me, not because it was impossible, but because it sounded practiced. I paid him and took the box home. At the time, I lived with my cousin Lena. We weren't close, but we shared the place to save money. She worked late shifts and didn't get home until after dark most nights. I spread the contents across the dining table while the house was still quiet. The more I looked, the worse it felt. The scarf matched one in a photo. The comb looked worn in the same spot, her hair parted. Everything felt connected, chosen. When Lena came home, she laughed at first. Told me I watched too many crime shows, but she stopped laughing when she picked up one of the photos and turned it over. There was writing on the back, dates, locations, times. Some of the places were close, too close. One of them was written as Briar Hollow Road, our street. That's when Lena told me to stop touching everything. Her voice sounded sharp, scared in a way I'd never heard before. She said if this was real, it didn't belong in our house. We called the police the next morning. They took the box. They asked questions, a lot of them, about the man, about the house, about how long we'd lived there. Weeks passed, then months. One afternoon, I got a call from a detective. He said the items had been logged as possible evidence. He thanked me. His voice was careful, like he was holding something fragile. Before he hung up, he asked me one last thing. He wanted to know if I was sure I hadn't seen the woman before. I told him no. But later that night, lying awake, I remembered something. A woman standing at the bus stop across from our house. dark hair pulled back, a scarf around her neck, looking down, always looking down. I still don't know if that memory is real. And sometimes, when I walk past yard sales now, I swear I smell old paper and dust. Sometimes I find myself checking the backs of photographs I don't remember taking, just in case someone else was closer than I thought. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if the box was meant to be found at all, or if it was only meant to be passed on. The town of Red Hollow sat beside a wide, slow-moving river that always smelled faintly of mud and rust. It wasn't a place people talked about unless they lived there. Folks waved when they passed each other, remembered birthdays, and noticed when a porch light stayed off too long. It was quiet in a way that felt safe at first. Too safe, maybe. Like nothing bad was supposed to happen there, but bad things still happened. In the fall of 2012, people in Red Hollow started whispering about Marla Keene. Marla was 39, with tired eyes, and a laugh that came out louder than she meant it to. She had 3 kids and worked long hours at a local supply store. Most people knew her as friendly, a little scattered, always in motion. She liked talking to strangers. She liked knowing people's stories. Some folks found that charming. Others found it unsettling, though they never said it out loud. On a chilly Saturday in late October, Marla held a yard sale in front of her small, pale blue house. She dragged old furniture onto the lawn, laid clothes across folding tables, and taped handwritten signs to wooden posts along the road. From early morning until the sun started dipping low, people came and went. Cars pulled up, doors slammed, voices floated through the air. Someone laughed too hard. A dog barked for a long time and then went quiet. Marla smiled through all of it. She talked to everyone. The woman who bought a chipped mirror. The man who stared too long at her kids' old shoes before walking away without buying anything. A teenager who asked if she had any video games, then lingered even after she said no. Marla noticed these things, but she didn't think much of them. Red Hollow was full of familiar faces and half-familiar ones. That was just how it worked. That night, Marla left the house around 9. She told her kids she was meeting a few friends for drinks at a costume party across town. She didn't dress up much, just threw on a cheap mask and a jacket. Before she walked out, she checked the locks twice, like she always did. The kids later argued about whether she looked worried or just tired. She never came back. The next morning, when Marla didn't answer her phone, people assumed she'd crashed at a friend's place. By noon, concern started to creep in. By evening, it felt heavier, like a pressure in the chest. Her car was found on a narrow gravel road outside town, parked crookedly as if she'd stopped in a hurry. All 4 tires were flat, not blown out, not shredded, just empty, sagging against the dirt. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her phone sat dark in the cup holder. The driver's door was open. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no footprints anyone could agree on. Just the sound of the river nearby, moving slow and steady, like it didn't care at all. People searched everywhere. Woods, old barns, ditches. Someone swore they heard a woman crying late at night, near the river, but when they went back the next day, there was nothing. Someone else said they saw a figure standing near the trees, watching the search parties. But when they pointed it out, the figure was gone. Weeks passed. In early December, a hunter found Marla's body in a patch of woods behind an abandoned chapel. It was close enough to town that people drove past it every day without realizing what was hidden there. Her body was partially covered with leaves and branches, arranged just enough to suggest someone had taken their time. The medical examiner said she'd been struck hard in the head, once, maybe twice. No one could say exactly when she died, only that she hadn't suffered long. That should have brought answers. It didn't. What it brought was tension. People started looking at each other differently. Conversations stopped when someone walked into a room. Doors locked earlier. Parents walked their kids to school, even though it was only a few blocks away. Everyone had a theory, and none of them lined up. Marla had been living with her cousin, Evan Keene, after a rough breakup. He slept in the basement. She slept upstairs. They barely crossed paths, according to him. Evan said he'd been home the night she disappeared, watching TV, half asleep on the couch. He said he didn't hear her come in, didn't hear her leave again either. Some people believed him, others didn't. There were rumors that Marla had been seeing someone new, rumors that she'd argued with someone at the yard sale, rumors that she'd been scared of something but didn't know how to explain it. One friend claimed, Marla said, a week before she vanished, "I feel like I'm being watched, but only when I'm alone." The police chased every lead they could. They interviewed yard sale visitors, party guests, neighbors. Everyone remembered something small and strange, but nothing solid. A weird look, a question that felt off, a car idling too long. Years went by. The case cooled, but it never went away. Not really. Marla's kids grew older and quieter. Evan moved out of town. The chapel where she was found collapsed during a storm and was eventually cleared away. The woods grew thicker. People in Red Hollow still talk about her, usually in low voices. They talk about how sometimes, late at night, the river smells stronger than it should, how porch lights flicker for no reason, how dogs refuse to go near that stretch of road where her car was found. And then there's this part. This is where it gets harder to explain. Every so often, someone reports finding a yard sale sign nailed to a post along the highway outside town. Just a piece of cardboard, written in shaky marker. No date, no address, just the words, "Everything must go." The signs disappear by morning. No one admits to putting them there. And sometimes, if you're driving late, when the road is empty and the trees press in close, you might see a car pulled off to the side. Door open, interior light glowing softly, waiting. If you stop, if you look inside, there's nothing there. But people swear they can smell old leaves, cold dirt, and something else, faint but familiar, like someone who never really left. People still talk about what happened in Maple Hollow, even though most of them pretend they don't. It was a small town tucked between long stretches of highway and empty fields. The kind of place where everyone waved, even if they didn't know your name. This all happened in 2016, back when garage sales were still a big deal and folks trusted strangers a little too easily. My cousin Lena lived there at the time. Not by blood, technically. She was my aunt's stepdaughter from a second marriage, but we grew up close, like real family. She had just moved into a small beige house near the edge of town. Nothing special. Thin walls, a creaky porch, one big oak tree out front that dropped acorns all night long. That spring, everyone in Maple Hollow seemed to be cleaning house. Every other weekend, cardboard signs popped up at intersections. Garage sale, Saturday only. Bright arrows pointing down quiet streets. Lena figured she'd join in. She had boxes of old dishes, clothes she didn't wear anymore, and random stuff left behind by the previous owner. The morning of her sale was warm but cloudy, not stormy, just heavy, like the air was holding its breath. I helped her set everything up early, then had to leave for work. She told me not to worry. Her boyfriend Aaron was supposed to stop by later, after his shift at the auto shop. Around mid-morning, Lena noticed a man standing across the street. He wasn't looking at the tables. He wasn't walking, just standing near a mailbox, hands in his jacket pockets, watching her house. She told herself she was being silly. People drifted all the time. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Eventually he crossed the street. He smiled, not wide, just enough to show teeth. He asked about a wooden chair she was selling. His voice was calm, almost bored. While she explained where it came from, his eyes kept drifting, not to the items, to the open door behind her, to the hallway, to the shadows inside the house. When he left, he didn't buy anything. By late afternoon, the street emptied out. Lena packed up most of the stuff, stacking boxes just inside the doorway. That's when she heard footsteps on the porch again. Slow ones. The same man stood there. This time, he didn't smile. He stepped inside before she could say anything. The door clicked shut behind him. He pulled a small gun from his pocket, like it was nothing, like he'd practiced it 100 times. He told her to stay quiet. His voice didn't change. No shouting. That was the worst part. He took cash from her purse. He walked through the house, opening drawers, checking closets. He seemed to know exactly where to look. Before he left, he leaned close and said, "Next time, don't sell alone." When the police arrived, they treated it like a random robbery. Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. Lena tried to explain how he watched her, how he came back later, but they just nodded and wrote things down. Then it happened again and again. Different streets, same setup, always garage sales, always women who were alone or nearly alone, always late in the day. People started whispering. They gave him a nickname, something catchy, something that made it sound less real. Lena stopped sleeping. Every sound made her jump. The oak tree outside her window scraped branches against the roof at night, and she swore it sounded like someone walking back and forth. One afternoon in early summer, she swore she saw him again, standing at the end of her block. Same jacket, same stillness. When she blinked, he was gone. The town tried to fight back. Folks paired up for sales. Some cancelled altogether. A few brave ones set up folding chairs and sat in groups, pretending everything was normal. Police cars cruised more often, but they never seemed to be around when it mattered. Then, in August, a woman named Ruthie was found unconscious in her driveway after her sale ended. Blood on the concrete, her jewelry gone, her front door wide open. She survived, but she couldn't remember his face. Just the sound of something heavy hitting her head, and then nothing. That's when the town really got scared. A neighborhood watch formed. People took turns sitting in cars, watching sales from a distance. That's how they caught someone in September. A man tried to corner a homeowner, and half a dozen people rushed in. He ran. They tackled him near a ditch. His name was Caleb North. He had stolen items in his trunk. Old watches, rings, loose bills folded small. The police said he'd been drifting through towns, staying nowhere long enough to be noticed. Everyone breathed again. Caleb went to prison. The news moved on. Maple Hollow went quiet, but Lena never felt right. She moved away the next year, somewhere bigger, somewhere louder. She said noise helped her sleep. We didn't talk about Maple Hollow much after that. Last winter, she called me out of nowhere. She asked if I remembered the oak tree. She said her new apartment had a tree outside the bedroom window. Different kind, different state, but every night, around the same time, she heard slow footsteps on concrete below. Always stopping right under her window. Always staying just long enough for her heart to start racing. She said maybe it was nothing. Then she asked me something strange. Did they ever prove Caleb acted alone? I told her yes. That's what they said. She went quiet for a long time. Before hanging up, she said, "Good. That means whoever watched my house last night wasn't him." I tried to call her back. She didn't answer. And sometimes, when I drive past a garage sale now, I catch myself scanning the edges of the street, not the tables, not the people laughing and bargaining. I look for someone standing still, watching, waiting for the end of the day. I still remember the summer of 2014, mostly because that was the year I stopped trusting random things people leave behind. My name's Evan, and back then I was 22, freshly out of school, broke, and living with my older cousin Mark in a quiet town called Ridgeway Flats. It was one of those places where nothing really happens. People mow their lawns on the same days every week. Everyone knows everyone. Yard sales pop up constantly because folks there never throw anything away. They just pass it along. One Saturday morning, Mark was working a double shift at the warehouse, and I was bored out of my mind. I decided to walk around the neighborhood and check out some yard sales. I wasn't hunting for anything specific. I didn't need furniture or clothes. I just wanted to kill time and maybe find something weird or interesting. By late morning, I'd already been to 4 or 5 sales. Old dishes, broken lamps, boxes of tangled cords no one could identify. I was ready to head back when I noticed a folding table set up at the very end of a long driveway. Most of the stuff was junk, but under the table, half hidden by a stained tablecloth, was a metal box. It wasn't big, about the size of a shoebox. Dark gray, scratched up, and heavier than it looked. The woman running the sale was older, maybe in her late 60s. I asked her about it, and she frowned like she'd forgotten it was even there. She told me it had belonged to her late brother-in-law, said he was into science stuff and that she never bothered opening it. After thinking for a moment, she shrugged and said I could have it for $5. I should have walked away. Instead, I paid her and carried it back to my car. That's when I noticed something odd. As I held it against my chest, I felt this faint buzzing. Not loud, not vibrating exactly. More like the feeling you get when your phone is about to ring, but deeper, slower. I stopped walking and held it out in front of me, waiting for the feeling to stop. It didn't. I laughed it off, told myself it was just nerves, or maybe the metal shifting inside, and drove home. Mark wasn't back yet, so I took the box into the kitchen. I remember setting it on the counter and just staring at it for a bit. The air around it felt wrong, thick, like the room was warmer in that one spot. When I opened it, the smell hit me first. Not rotten, not chemical, just old, like dust that had been sealed away for decades. Inside was a metal ball sitting in a bed of black foam. It was smooth, dull silver, about the size of a baseball. When I touched it, I pulled my hand back fast. It was warm. Not hot enough to burn, but warm in a way that didn't make sense. Under the foam were several folded papers. They were brittle, yellowed, and covered in handwritten notes, diagrams, and symbols I didn't recognize. Some of the ink had bled through the pages, making everything look messy and frantic. One symbol on the ball caught my attention. It was carved deep into the metal. Not a warning sign. Not anything I'd seen before. Just a shape that made my eyes slide away when I tried to focus on it. I should have put the box away right then. Instead, I took pictures. I posted them on an online forum, figuring someone would recognize it. People responded fast. Jokes poured in. Movie props, alien tech. Someone even asked if I'd found it in the desert. Then one comment showed up that didn't sound like a joke at all. "Get it out of your house. That thing isn't safe." My stomach tightened. I reread the comment again and again. A few minutes later, I got a private message from the same person. They said they worked with industrial safety materials. Didn't explain much. Just told me to stop touching it, move it somewhere isolated, and wait for instructions. That's when I started shaking. I carried the box into the garage, holding it at arm's length, like it might suddenly bite me. The buzzing feeling was stronger now. I could feel it in my teeth. I placed it inside an old storage bin and backed away. The person messaged again, asking questions. How warm was it? Did it make noise? Were there papers? They explained that some experimental materials from decades ago were never properly disposed of. Some were forgotten, some were hidden. They told me to call the authorities. When the response team arrived, they didn't look surprised. That scared me more than anything else. They wore thick suits and masks. One of them waved a device over the bin, and it started clicking fast. Too fast. They took everything away and warned me to see a doctor if I felt sick. Mark came home that night, annoyed that he'd missed the excitement. We laughed it off, but neither of us slept well. Weeks passed, nothing happened. No calls, no updates. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel that buzzing. Lying in bed, sitting in quiet rooms, it feels like it's coming from inside my chest now. A few nights ago, I woke up with my hands warm, warmer than they should have been. And for just a second, I swear I could see that symbol burned faintly into my skin. It was gone by morning. I haven't told anyone. I don't know who I'd even tell. And sometimes I wonder if they really took everything away, or if something small was left behind. Let me tell you this like I'd tell it to someone sitting across from me, maybe late at night, when the street outside is quiet, and every little sound seems louder than it should be. This happened in 2013, in a place called Hollow Creek, a short street that didn't really go anywhere. Most people there had lived on the block forever. Everyone knew everyone, or at least pretended to. I was living with my older cousin Marla at the time, crashing on her couch while I figured my life out. That's important, because it meant I was there that morning, close enough to see things most people only heard about later. Marla's friend Evelyn lived 3 houses down. She was the kind of person who never threw anything away. Every spring, she'd drag half her house onto her lawn and call it a yard sale. Old chairs with missing screws, boxes of mismatched dishes, clothes that still smelled faintly like someone else's life. People always showed up anyway, mostly out of curiosity. That morning, the air felt wrong from the start, heavy still, like the day was holding its breath. Evelyn had tied her little dog, Pip, to a metal post near the driveway. Pip was a scruffy thing, no bigger than a loaf of bread, and nervous around strangers. He kept barking in short bursts, then stopping, like he was listening for something between the sounds. A few neighbors wandered around the tables. Kids poked at toys. Someone laughed. I remember thinking it all felt forced, like everyone was pretending it was a normal Saturday. Down at the far end of Hollow Creek lived a man named Caleb. He didn't talk much. People said he was polite, but distant. He had a large dog named Rook. Nobody was ever quite sure what kind of dog Rook was. Big head, long body, muscles that shifted under his fur when he moved. Caleb usually kept him locked behind a tall wooden gate. You didn't see Rook much, but when you did, you noticed. That morning, the gate was open. I didn't see Rook at first. I heard him, a low sound, somewhere between a growl and a breath. It made the hair on my arm stand up before my brain caught up. Rook came trotting into the street, nose low, sniffing like he was following a trail only he could see. At first, it didn't look dangerous, just a dog loose. That happens. But he moved with purpose, not playful, not curious, focused. Pip started barking again, sharper this time, not yappy, panicked. Rook lifted his head. That was the moment everything shifted. You could feel it, like a drop in pressure. Rook's ears went back. His tail stopped wagging and went stiff, like a rod. His eyes locked on the yard sale, on the movement, the noise, the mess of human life spread out on folding tables. Someone said, "Whose dog is that?" Rook broke into a run. People scattered fast. A kid named Noah, who lived across the street from Evelyn, dropped a plastic action figure and screamed as he ran to his aunt. The sound of it cut straight through me. Real fear does that. It doesn't echo, it just hits. Rook leaped onto one of the tables. Wood cracked. Glass exploded across the concrete, sharp and bright in the sunlight. Evelyn yelled something I don't remember the words, just the sound of her voice breaking. Rook grabbed a stuffed bear and ripped it open, stuffing spilling out like snow. He shook it hard, then dropped it like it no longer mattered. Then he turned toward Pip. Pip was losing it now, pulling against the rope, choking on his own barking. Evelyn ran for him, scooping him up just as Rook lunged. I remember the sound of Rook's teeth snapping shut where Pip's neck had been a second before. Evelyn screamed, not loud, thin like she didn't have enough air. Rook circled her, slow, careful like he was thinking. A man named Jonah stepped in. He was Marla's co-worker, I think, or maybe her ex. I never got that straight. He put himself between Evelyn and the dog, waving his arms, shouting nonsense words, anything to sound big. Rook hit him hard. Jonah went down fast. Rook's teeth sank into his leg, and the sound Jonah made didn't sound human. He punched at the dog's head, tried to kick, but Rook held on, shaking like he was tearing fabric. Someone threw a folding chair. It bounced off Rook's side like it was nothing. Rook let go of Jonah's leg and jumped on his chest. Jonah raised his arms to protect his face, and Rook's claws raked down, leaving dark lines that filled with blood almost immediately. That's when Caleb appeared, running, shouting Rook's name over and over. His voice cracked, high with panic. Rook froze, just for a second, long enough for Caleb to snap the leash onto his collar. Rook didn't fight it. That part still bothers me. Caleb kept apologizing, over and over, like saying it enough times might rewind everything. Someone was yelling at him. Someone else was on the phone with emergency services. Evelyn was sitting on the ground, holding Pip so tight I thought she might hurt him. Paramedics came. Police came. Jonah was loaded into an ambulance, his face grey, his eyes fixed on something above him that no one else could see. Afterward, people cleaned up. Broken glass, torn fabric, blood washed into the gutter with a hose. The street went quiet again. Too quiet. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I heard barking. Not loud, distant, coming from the far end of Hollow Creek. Then it stopped. I asked Marla the next day if she heard it too. She said no. Said Caleb and Rook had been gone since the incident. Animal control, she thought. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That low breathing sound, right outside the window. And every time, Pip starts barking back, even though Pip has been gone for years now. And the strangest part, when I look outside, there's never a dog, just the gate at the end of the street, wide open. It happened in 2014, late summer, back when I was still renting that little duplex on Hickory Bend Road, the one with the cracked driveway and the mailbox that leaned like it was tired of standing. I didn't know many people in the neighborhood yet, but everyone knew about the yard sale that popped up at Marrow Lane every August. Same house, same folding tables, same faded cardboard signs nailed to telephone poles. I wasn't looking for anything special that morning. I just wanted to get out of the house. I remember thinking the air felt strange, heavy, like a storm was coming, even though the sky was clear. You know that feeling, when the day looks normal but your gut keeps tapping you on the shoulder. The yard sale was already busy when I got there. Kids poking at old toys, couples flipping through books, someone arguing loudly about the price of a toaster. Normal stuff. I drifted from table to table until I saw an old green lawn chair with cracked plastic straps. It looked exactly like the one my Uncle Raymond used to sit in every evening, out back, drinking warm soda and staring at nothing. I don't know why that memory hit me so hard, but it did. While I was messing with the chair, I heard voices, not yelling at first, more like sharp talking, clipped and tense. I looked up and saw a woman named Claudia standing at a table covered in dishes. She had this tight smile people wear when they're already angry but trying not to show it. Across from her was a man called Walter, someone I'd seen around before but never spoken to. He was older, thick in the shoulders, with hands that looked like they'd been broken more than once. They were arguing over a box of china plates, real old ones, with tiny blue flowers around the edges, the kind that look delicate until you realize they've survived longer than most people you know. Neither of them owned the sale. That's what made it weird. They were just two strangers acting like the plates already belonged to them. At first, I tried to ignore it. Yard sales bring out something ugly in people. Pride, maybe, or desperation. Claudia kept pointing at the plates, her fingers shaking just a little. Walter leaned forward, blocking the box with his body like a guard dog. The air around them felt tight. You could feel it pulling people's attention in, even if they didn't want to look. Then Claudia raised her voice, not screaming, just loud enough to cut through the chatter. Walter answered back, louder. The words blurred together, but their faces said enough. Teeth clenched, eyes hard. The kind of argument where neither person is listening anymore. Someone near me muttered, "This isn't going to end well," and laughed nervously. I wish I'd taken that seriously. The owner of the house, Megan, came rushing over, hands up, telling them to calm down. She sounded scared, like she already knew she was too late. That's when Claudia grabbed one of the plates. She lifted it over her head, and for a second everything went quiet. Not silent, exactly, but muted, like the world pulled back to watch. I remember thinking how thin the plate looked against the sky, how easy it would be to break, how loud the sound would be. Walter lunged forward. He was quicker than I expected. His hands clamped around the plate, and suddenly they were wrestling, both of them grunting, feet sliding on the grass. Claudia's purse slipped off her shoulder and hit the ground. She didn't let go. Walter twisted, pulling hard, too hard. The plate came free, and then he fell. It happened fast, but I see it slow when I think about it. His foot slipped, his body turned, his weight went down wrong. The plate shattered against the ground, and at the same time he made this sound. Not a scream, more like all the air leaving his body at once. No one moved. For a few seconds, it felt like time just stopped. Walter lay face down, arms bent wrong, legs still. Claudia stared at him like she didn't recognize what she was seeing. Then the blood started spreading beneath him, dark and thick. That's when the screaming started. People rushed in. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Someone else told Walter not to move. Claudia backed away, hands over her mouth, saying his name, even though I don't think she'd known it before that day. When they rolled him over, I saw the piece of plate sticking out of his stomach. White porcelain, sharp and clean, like it had been placed there on purpose. Claudia collapsed to her knees. She was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Walter's eyes were open, staring at nothing, his chest jerking as he tried to pull air into lungs that didn't want to work anymore. The paramedics came fast, too fast, almost, like they'd been nearby already. They loaded him into the ambulance, sirens off, faces tight and quiet. The police took statements. I told them what I saw, what I heard. The words felt thin and useless. Later, they said Walter died on the way to the hospital. Claudia left town within a week. Some people said she ran. Others said the neighborhood made her leave. No charges were filed. Officially, it was an accident. But here's the thing that still bothers me. A few days later, I went back to Marrow Lane. I don't know why. I just felt pulled there. The yard sale was gone. The grass was flattened where people had stood. But near the edge of the driveway, I saw something white half buried in the dirt. A piece of porcelain. I picked it up. It was smooth on one side, jagged on the other. And right there, in the center of the blue floral pattern, was a dark stain that wouldn't wash off, no matter how hard I scrubbed it later. That night, I dreamed of Walter standing at the foot of my bed, holding the plate out to me, asking me if it was worth it. I still hear that grunt sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, and every August, when the air gets heavy again. I swear I smell fresh-cut grass and old china. There hasn't been another yard sale on Marrow Lane since. Some people say it's because of what happened. Others say it's because something there is still waiting for someone to pick it up.